Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Dexter. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Engagement at the University of Delaware, and I am very excited to introduce to you our virtual event, Not Your Typical Wine Tasting. We have a really fun evening planned, and we look forward to interacting with all of you. I have just a couple of housekeeping things. We would encourage questions through the program. As we sample each of the 4 wines, we'll have a slide that accompanies those wines. And after that wine and slide occurs, we will open it up for questions. Probably the best way for us to address those questions would be using the chat feature on the window. And so if you could type your question in there, that would be great. Also, if you would like to raise your virtual hand. And so if you go down to the bottom of the Zoom menu, you'll see reactions. And you can and raise your hand, or through the participants link, you can also raise your hand there. And then I will do my best to call on you so that we can actually hear your voice. I'm also very excited to introduce to you the president of the South Florida Alumni Club, who has done a lot of work to help get us to this point, Jennifer Falcone. And so she's going to make some opening remarks as well. And then we will have a little closing session at the end. And so I look forward to enjoying some wine with all of you and getting to know a little bit more about what we'll experience this evening. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer. I am the president of the South Florida Alumni Club, and I am pleased to bring you greetings from sunny South Florida. I hope you all are doing really well. I am super excited about our presentation tonight and about our guest speaker, who is Brian Tannebaum, a very good friend of mine. He's been a lawyer in Miami for 25 years. And if you are a lawyer or a judge who has gotten yourself in trouble, Brian is the one that you want to call. He's quite the expert on everything ethics in South Florida and throughout the state of Florida. He's currently chair of the Innocence Project of Florida. He's got accolades coming out of every single publication and bar association. He's really a speaker, he's a stellar lawyer, and a wonderful friend. But his real passion is wine, and wine is something that he knows a lot about as well. He has been a certified sommelier since 2011. He took the tests, he did the blind tastings, and he became an expert in that as well. And he gives lots of wine tastings and charitable wine-related events that he hosts, and he has graciously volunteered to present such a tasting for us tonight. And we're so excited to have you here, Brian. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I know we're here to drink some wine, but I'm also here to give you a little education on some things and answer some questions that you may have. Let me answer some questions that I always get, which is, when did you get into wine? I don't remember. I think it was about 15 years ago. Somebody gave me a really good glass of wine. I liked it. I drank some more. I went to some free tastings, some $20 tastings, and I just started getting into it, started buying a lot of it, collecting it, giving it out to friends, having wine parties. And then one day I said, well, I think I want to get some knowledge here. So I signed up to become a sommelier, not being in the industry at all. There were 25 people in my class. 4 people were like me. There was a pharmacist, there was a retired tech executive, and somebody else who I don't remember. But the 21 other people were in the industry and they had to pass the test. They worked in restaurants, hotels, cruise ships. I was just doing it for fun. It was one of the most difficult things I did since studying for the bar exam. And I didn't tell anyone I was doing it because I was afraid I was going to fail. So I went to class and I took the test, and they brought me into the room. If you've seen the movie Somm, which I highly recommend to you, it's really actually how it happens, where they bring you in a room, they sit you down, and they sat me down and they said, "You're a lawyer, right?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, we didn't think you would do very well, but you passed." And I became a sommelier. What does that mean? It means I have a really big certificate in my office that now hangs above my law degree. And I get a lot of text messages from people about, it's my anniversary, it's my husband's birthday, I'm having a dinner, what do you think I should serve? And so I've done a bunch of tastings and a bunch of things like this. And so I was really honored when Jennifer asked me to join you tonight and talk to you about these 4 different wines. One thing you'll notice, other than the Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, I wanted you to drink something different. Most people find a wine they like, and that's what they drink. And most people, because I sit at hotel bars and watch people and I walk around the aisles at Total Wine, they want their Cabernet, they want their Merlot, they want their Pinot. When I ask people, you know, what's the last Petite Syrah you had? They don't know. What do you think about Zinfandel? They think, oh, white Zinfandel. The Zinfandel you're going to drink tonight is not white Zinfandel. It's red Zinfandel. And it's actually one of my favorite wines. So I wanted to put some different stuff out there. The other thing I want to tell you is people always ask me, how should I get into wine? And it's kind of funny to say, but the way to get into wine is to drink it. Find every wine tasting you have in your town. Obviously now things are different, but read. Buy something different. If you really love Pinot Noir, buy something else and just try it. You may not like it, but at least then you know, and your palate will change. You love Sauvignon Blanc, and then all of a sudden you drink a Viognier and you're like, this is amazing. Let me drink some Viognier. But you should always try different wines. The other thing I want to say, and this is particularly relevant about tonight, is people want to know whether the more expensive wines are better. More expensive wines are more expensive because of production and the limitation on what you can get. So if there's a winemaker in Napa who makes 20 cases of a wine, and that's how, you know, he or she makes their living, they've got to sell those bottles for $150, $200 to even break even. Is the wine better than a $10 Chardonnay or $10 Cabernet? Probably, but not necessarily. I have spilled out $100 bottles of wine because I thought they were awful. And I have bought cases of wine that cost under $10. I always tell a very funny story about a wine party I had at my house where somebody came over. Everyone was to bring a bottle of wine. He brought in a decanter. And I said, what is that? And he said, I want you to try it. And of course I said, I need to know what it is. And he said, just drink it. And I drank it. It was amazing. It turned out to be a $7 red wine from Portugal. And I went to Total Wine the next day. They had like 6 bottles there and I bought them all. The price of wine doesn't necessarily dictate how good it is. And for somebody like me, I always say, when I open up an expensive bottle of wine, I have expectations. When I open up a $10 bottle of wine, I have no expectations. So when that wine is really good or even decent, someone like me gets excited. I love to get a cheap bottle of wine and for it to be good. So with that being said, we're going to start with Chardonnay. I had recommended to you a Beringer Chardonnay, which is called the California Collection. They don't make it anymore. I had 2 bottles left. They've now moved to a wine called Main and Vine, which is $6.99 a bottle. But I had some of this, the California Collection Chardonnay that I bought for $4.79. Now, if we were at a live tasting, I wouldn't have told you that. I normally pour it for people, and I ask them if they like it. I actually like this Chardonnay, and I'm not a Chardonnay fan at all. And I asked them how much they think it costs. Nobody says they think it costs $4.79. They say, well, $8, $12, people say $25. But what I'd like you to do now is pour your Chardonnay. And the one thing I want to talk to you about when you're doing a tasting, this is a tasting. It's not a drinking. When we're done here at 8 o'clock, you can drink all the rest of the wine. But when you're tasting wine, it's very important not to pour a lot of wine in the glass. And the number one reason is because you got to stick your nose in it, right? You got to smell it, and then you got to swirl it around. And if you pour it a half a glass, like sometimes you get at a restaurant, it's going to spill. The other problem you're going to have is that there's a lot in there. And so it doesn't give it an opportunity to let the glass cause the bouquet and the wine to express itself. So you want to just pour about that much into a glass so you can swirl it around, and then you can try it. Now, I can't see everybody because there's a lot of people here, but I'd like to know, and you can put it in the chat if you want, what did you buy? What Chardonnay did you get? And whether you like it. I think that's important. Obviously, again, I can't see because of all the people here, but go ahead and do that. The next thing I want you to do with this wine, I told you to get some cheese. So can we put up the Chardonnay slide? Oh, there it is. Okay. So the thing about Chardonnay, the word we use with Chardonnay is butter, or butter bomb. There are some Chardonnays that have a lot of butter flavor to it. Some people like that. I don't like it. People like drier Chardonnays. I like drier Chardonnays that don't taste like butter. Most of those Chardonnays are not put in wood, oak barrels. They're put in stainless steel or concrete. So depending on what you like in Chardonnay, if you like the butter, you want a Chardonnay that is heavily what's called oaked. That means it's been sitting in a barrel, and that's where that butter flavor is coming from. It's coming from the barrel. So if you want a drier Chardonnay, what you want to ask for is a Chardonnay that has been in a steel container or some sort of concrete. Now, the next thing I want you to do, because one of the important things about wine is there's wine you can drink alone and there's wine you can drink with food. Chardonnay is the most planted grape in the world. Okay, it's planted obviously in California, it's planted in France, it's really planted everywhere you go. Everybody makes a Chardonnay, okay? But the important thing about wine is how it changes the flavor of food. So what I would like everybody to do is grab some blue cheese, put it in your mouth, and taste the Chardonnay. Now that should be awful. You should say to yourself, that is absolutely terrible. Now what I want you to do is take some of the goat cheese, if you got goat cheese, and do the same thing. Put it in your mouth, take a sip. So I don't care what you're drinking. That cheese just complemented the wine that you're drinking. And that's the difference. On the other side of this, I want you to know that pairing food and wine should not be a science. Most people, even if they don't know about wine, will say, you drink white wine with fish and red wine with steak. Generally, yes. But the other night, I had an Asian dish that had some steak in it, but it had so much soy, and it had that soy, salty kind of flavor. I said, this is going to go better with a dry white wine, even though there's steak in it. The red wine is just going to drown this out. So I opened up a bottle of dry white wine, and it was perfect. But don't be afraid to experiment. Would I recommend a Chardonnay with a filet mignon? No. But you can drink Pinot Noir with fish, and you can drink white wines with things that you normally wouldn't think. One of the kind of borderline foods is chicken. Chicken, depending on how you make it. So if you're making like a lemon chicken, you know, try some Chardonnay with it instead of opening up a red wine. Or you can open up a Pinot. The biggest problem we have with, you know, pairing food and wine is when we get to Thanksgiving. You know, what pairs with everything? And I always have this joke every year. I do this post where I say, don't ask me about Thanksgiving. Drink whatever you want. Because Aunt Mary likes her Moscato, and Dad likes to drink his, you know, Merlot. And so, you know what, just buy 4 or 5 bottles of wine and put them out. And, you know, what I always say about Thanksgiving is nobody's there for the wine, they're there for the food. Maybe your family's different. Can we put up the second Chardonnay slide? Okay. So, and these are slides, by the way, that I just pulled off the internet. I didn't do these. But, you know, this talks about what it says, everything you need to know about Chardonnay, and it talks about the buttery nature of Chardonnay. But then at the bottom, it has some food pairings: shellfish, smoked fish, risotto, winter soups. I have never paired wine with soup. I don't think I ever would. But there is, you know, some talk on the internet and some of these things about what soup to pair with wine. Everything is personal, okay? I always tell people wine is great to pair with popcorn. Open up a bottle of champagne and some popcorn, and you'll enjoy it a lot, especially if it's kettle corn with champagne. It pairs really, really well. So the key to the Chardonnay is that it's a very versatile wine. If it's a drier Chardonnay, you can drink it with a heavier food, like a chicken. If it's that butter bomb kind of around the pool Chardonnay, you're probably going to want it with your appetizer, or maybe just when, you know, you're getting ready for dinner and you're making dinner, you just want to pour yourself some Chardonnay. There's really nothing that's going to kill the Chardonnay except for what we just did, which is that pungent cheese, okay? The way to determine whether a Chardonnay is dry is not on the label unless it says how long it's been in a barrel. More and more wineries want you to know that the wine spent 18 months in steel. That's a dry Chardonnay. Or 18 months in concrete. Or 18 months in French oak barrels. Oak barrels is a key to butter. And again, I always say, they say, Brian, what should I drink? I drink what you like. I don't like butter bomb Chardonnays. I can have a line out the door of people that say, I only drink butter bomb Chardonnays, and that's fine. But that's what you look for. If the label doesn't say it, then ask the person at the wine shop. I know a lot about wine, obviously, but when I go to a wine shop, I ask questions because you get to know, let's say you go to the same wine shop all the time. That person knows what you're buying. And you should say to that person, I do this all the time. I say, okay, I'm buying, 6 bottles of wine today. I'm going to pick 5. I want you to pick 1. And it's always a fun thing because they say, okay, well, here's what you've bought. I think you're going to like this. I just got this in. Try it. Don't be afraid to do this. And I will tell you, most people find a wine they like, and that's all they buy. They buy cases of it, and that's all they drink. And I think you're cheating yourself if you're doing that. So, what do you do with white wine? White wine doesn't last as long as red wine. It just doesn't. So you're going to taste some of the Chardonnay tonight, and then what are you going to do with it? You're going to put it back in the fridge. And it's probably going to last a day and a half. Just stick the cork back in it and put it back in the fridge. You'll know when it's flat, because that's what happens to white wine. It's like soda, it just gets flat. It's not going to taste sour unless it's in there for weeks and weeks. It's just going to taste like there's no acid left, and you're just not going to enjoy it. One thing I see people do all the time, and I've never understood this, is they open the wine, they pour it, and they put the cork back in. With white wine, I understand if you're out by the pool and you're trying to, keep it from warming up a little bit. But in general, if it's in the house, I wouldn't put the cork back in it. Okay, the white wine needs to breathe, not as much as red wine, but it needs to breathe. So don't stick the cork in right away. When you put it back in the fridge, go ahead and do that, obviously. And you don't have to push it all the way down. Just, put the cork in so that it's something to close the wine. But after about a day and a half of these wines, these under $10 Chardonnays, I wouldn't keep them. You can take a sip and see if you like it, but I wouldn't keep them. So let's move on to the Sauvignon Blanc. Now, I don't know what you're doing with glasses, okay? And before we'll see if there's any questions. Don't mix the whites and reds unless you have to, okay? Because you're gonna get like a rosé, okay? If you rinse the glass, make sure you dry it so there's no water in there. But what I'm doing tonight is I have 2 glasses, one for the 2 whites and one for the 2 reds. Questions about Chardonnay?
So I think you answered one of the questions already, but it was how best to store these wines. So if someone is doing this tonight and maybe they're single or they're not going to be able to drink all the bottles of wine tonight, what's the best way to store them?
So here's a tip. I live in Miami where we've had 1 or 2 hurricanes over the years. I always fear chilling my white wine when I'm not going to drink it, just to have it chilled. Now I keep a certain amount chilled, but I don't chill all my white wine right away because once it is not chilled and you chill it again, there's a problem. And that's why wine stores will tell you if you want to return white wine, it better not be chilled. If you haven't chilled it, they'll take it back because once you chill it and it goes back up to, because it's chilled at 37 degrees. So once it goes back up to room temperature and then it goes back down to 37 degrees, it loses some of its acidity and it becomes basically like nothing. It becomes like a flat wine. The other thing is this. White wine takes about 90 minutes to chill, okay? Put it in the freezer. Put it in the freezer for about 15, 20 minutes, and then take it out. It's going to be really, really cold. It's not going to explode. Nothing's going to happen. But oftentimes, I'm going to a friend's house. I'm going to bring a bottle of white wine that's not chilled. I go stick it in the freezer, go get ready, come back. It's cold enough. It may be even a little too cold. And then I just stick it in a bag that has like a little ice pack and take it. So that's a tip. If you don't have a cold white wine on hand, stick it in the freezer, wait about 15, 20 minutes, and it should be good. The last thing I will tell you about white wine, and you may have heard this, we drink our white wines too cold and our red wines too warm. When you take a bottle of white out of the refrigerator, wait 10 or 15 minutes before you drink it. White wine, when it gets cold, all the flavor is closed. Once the air gets in and a little heat gets in there, the flavors will come out. You drink this Chardonnay in 5 minutes, it's going to taste different than it tasted 10 minutes ago. Okay?
We have another question about, is there a rule of thumb for knowing whether a Chardonnay is more or less dry?
So the rule of thumb is how it's made. That's the only way you're going to know is how it's made. And again, if it's not on the label, how the wine was stored, either in an oak barrel, it won't say oak, it'll just say barrel, or steel tank, or concrete, you're not going to know. But whoever is selling that wine should know. You can also look it up. We all have cell phones. Just pull out your cell phone, Google the wine, and just type in oak, barrel, steel. Something will come up about where the wine is stored. It's a very important thing for wineries, for you to know how their wine is stored before it's bottled.
We have a question from Jim. We prefer less oak taste. Can you talk about steel or concrete fermented?
Yes, I'm a huge fan. Barrels are the most common ways that wine is stored. And what happens in a barrel is you taste it, right? I mean, the barrel is wood and the wine is sitting in there, and the wine becomes what's called oaked. And depending on how long it's in there, the minimum is usually 4 to 6 months on cheaper wines because they're trying to push it out. 12 to 18 months is kind of the benchmark, and sometimes wines are in for 24 months. In Italy, some wines are in there for 36 to 48 months. But, you know, if you want something dry, don't buy wine that was stored in an oak barrel, because even though what happens with oak barrels is a winery will tell you that they use neutral French oak. What does that mean? That means that the barrel is old and the toast in the wood has faded. So the wood is of no factor anymore. Okay, it's neutral. That's what they call it. It's a neutral French oak. That Chardonnay is going to be a little drier, but nothing's going to be as dry as if it's in steel or concrete, and mostly steel. Concrete is one of those things that it's very, very old and it's now coming back. But most wineries are either using oak or steel. And obviously oak is very expensive, very expensive. And wineries spend a lot of money on these barrels. Steel's different because they keep them for a long time.
Two last questions. The first one is about glass shape. And so sort of ballooned for red, thinner, narrow opening for white. Do you agree with that? Does it matter?
Yes, and I love the question because everybody wants to know, does it really matter? And the answer is yes. Riedel, who makes crystal wine glasses, they actually do a class, and they do it at Total Wine. They're not doing it now, obviously, but I went, and you bought this box of 6 glasses, all different sizes, and they poured, 2 or 3 different wines in the same glasses. It was the most amazing experience I ever had, because I've always known that, different glasses create a different flavor profile. But in general, for us kind of normal people, a white wine glass is going to be narrower, okay? And it's going to be kind of narrow at the top. And the reason for that is because it's keeping the cool in the glass. A red wine glass is going to be a bigger kind of bowl because it needs to breathe, because there's only one kind of grape. People laugh when I say this. All grapes are white. The only difference between red and white grapes is that red grapes have a skin. And the only reason that red wine is the color is because of the skin of the grape. And that's why red wine has what's called tannins. That's why people sometimes say, oh, I got headaches from too much tannin in the wine. But a different glass size will change your life. I would always get a smaller glass size for white and a bigger glass size for red. If you're using stemless, that's fine. But just understand that when you put your hand on a glass, the heat from your fingers is going to heat that wine up. And that's helpful in a white wine because you can just do this, right? Put your hand around this for about 2 minutes and the wine will heat up a few degrees. But be careful with stemless, only that, you know, it's going to heat up your white wine. Most people use stemless for like the pool, which is fine. I use it for dinner parties where I'm concerned that people are going to break my glasses. But those are fine. But yeah, you should have a bigger glass for red and a smaller glass for white.
Okay, and then the last Chardonnay question is, does Chardonnay color matter? Many vineyards use yellowish bottles, and so you don't always get to see what it looks like when you buy it.
That's a good question. The key to Chardonnay or any white wine is that the older the wine, the darker it gets. So I was lucky enough to open up a 20-year-old Chardonnay for Mother's Day a couple years ago. It looked like honey. It just becomes a little more thick and dark. Most of your Chardonnay should be that same golden color. As far as not being able to tell from the bottle, that happens a lot because you have bottles that are green tinged, bottles that are yellow tinged, and then when you pour the wine, it looks a little bit different. But and I know it's kind of hard to see on this, but your average Chardonnay you should be able to see right through it, just like that. That's important. It should be clear. It should be a little golden. If it's a little darker, it may be something that's older, but I wouldn't be concerned about it.
Okay, thank you. Great questions, everyone.
Okay, let's go to Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc gets a really bad rap. It's made in France, it's made in the United States, and it's made in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, other than Pinot, it is the most popular wine there. Now, Sauvignon Blanc is half of Cabernet Sauvignon. That's how Cabernet Sauvignon came from. It came from Cabernet Franc, which is still a produced wine, very small production, and Sauvignon Blanc. The DNA got mixed. That's how they got Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, New Zealand is a fascinating place for Sauvignon Blanc, and I'll tell you why. Back in the mid-2000s, Malbec got very popular from Argentina, and the price went up. New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc has become extremely popular. If you go to a grocery store now, there's not 3 bottles of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. There's an entire section of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And the price, while it's creeped up a little bit, has basically stayed the same. Sauvignon Blanc has a huge flavor profile. It's not like your sit around the pool kind of drink wine, although you may do that. It is the perfect wine for a really pungent salad that's got like some kind of balsamic vinaigrette. It's got like a real flavor to it. If you want to mix it with that, pair it with that, your New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is what you should use. Now, most, if not all, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is made in steel, and it's very dry. And not to be offensive, but a lot of wine experts say that Sauvignon Blanc smells like cat urine. It's just got a very pungent smell. It also smells like grass, but it's just not your simple kind of wine. I love Sauvignon Blanc. I love New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. I love for $10, you can get a phenomenal New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. The one that I have tonight is the Oyster Bay. And interestingly enough about Oyster Bay is this is a wine that I just saw one day. I saw it at CVS and I bought it. It was $8.99. I said, well, if it's bad, it's not going to ruin my life. So I liked it. And a friend of mine who loves Sauvignon Blanc asked me, do you have a Sauvignon Blanc? I said, no, Oyster Bay. It's at CVS for $8.99. And now, of course, unfortunately, it's all she drinks. But I saw it yesterday for $12.99, not at CVS, but at a grocery store. So the price has kind of creeped up a little bit, but it's not, you know, $18, $19. The interesting thing about New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is it is a high production wine, and it's still great. I think it's great. And it's mostly screw top. We'll talk about screw top in a minute, but you get a really good value for $10 to $15 on wines like Kim Crawford. They make tens of thousands of cases of Kim Crawford. So you think you lose something in that, but every bottle of Kim Crawford I've ever opened, I've enjoyed. And Whitehaven is another one. New Zealand is just really, really doing well with Sauvignon Blanc. And it's just one of those wines that for, you know, not a lot of money, you can pair with some really decent food. Can we move to the second slide there? So here, and we're going to do this now, we're going to take a sip of the Sauvignon Blanc with, and do this for me, please. Let's start with the blue cheese, okay, and try it. Now that may be a little better than the Chardonnay, right? Because the Sauvignon Blanc is a little bit pungent. So it kind of brings out that blue cheese. It's not so different. You know, drinking blue cheese with Chardonnay is kind of the same thing as drinking blue cheese with, like, you know, Sprite. I mean, it's just not good at all. It's totally mixing wine and cheese that shouldn't be mixed. But let's grab some goat cheese. Take a sip. I think that's perfect. I mean, I could just keep doing that. Okay, that's really good. So again, oyster-based Sauvignon Blanc, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, mostly done in steel. And when we look at the pairings here, another pairing is salmon, asparagus, salads. The thing about Sauvignon Blanc for me is you can really experiment. If you're making something that's just kind of strange, it's got a lot of different flavors to it, and you're not sure what wine to pair with it. Remember, a lot of your reds are going to be very big and thick, and if you're making a meal or even, you know, appetizer or something that has a lot of, you know, kind of a little bit of spice, a little bit of sugar, salt, whatever, and you just want to kind of bring that out, this is the wine. This is the wine right here. And for $9, $10, $11, $12, you're pairing it with something that's really going to be enjoyable. I mean, I'm still tasting the goat cheese and Sauvignon Blanc, and I'm just very impressed with how that comes out. So the key to this wine is it's a great wine to serve at a party. It's a great wine for people that, you know, I only drink Chardonnay. And it's a great wine to pair with that really interesting salad that you made, or that salmon with some kind of a mustard sauce, or you're trying some new recipe somewhere with chicken or fish, or something that's got a little bit of, I don't want to say spice, but a little bit of sweetness to it, like some balsamic vinaigrette. This is the wine that I would pair. If I was doing a dinner party, this would be paired with the first course, some kind of a shrimp course, some kind of a salad course, or even with the main course, as long as it was had some kind of a sauce that I thought would pair nicely with it. Questions?
Okay, so not as many questions this time. How do we sign up for the blog with the recipes?
Oh, I don't have that. I just find them online. I don't have my own. Maybe I should start one, but I don't have one.
Maybe you should, yeah. Yeah, no, not too many questions. Just
Okay.
some fun conversation back and forth about the kinds, and then not smelling and tasting like cat pee.
Yeah, that's the wrap it gets. It doesn't taste like it, but it smells like it.
Yeah.
So, all right, are we ready to move to some reds?
Sure.
Okay. So the exciting thing for me about the whites is they're cheap and they're good, in my opinion. And that's important because it just shows that you don't have to spend $25 on a bottle of white wine for it to be good. You can, but you're going to be more disappointed if you do that and you don't like it than if you spend $7 on a bottle and it's really not that great. I'm just stunned by this Beringer, $4.79 wine that I think over delivers. I think it easily tastes like a $15 Chardonnay. I think if you get these kinds of recommendations, you should take them and try them because you will be surprised at the quality of some of these wines. There's no such thing as a quote $5 wine or a $10 wine. With that being said, let's get to the Petite SIRAH. This is what I got. This is Spellbound. Okay, nice pretty bottle. Got that kind of long neck. Okay, and again, what I did was poured a little bit. So I want to swirl it around. I want to have some room in the glass. I want it to open up. So let's talk about Spellbound. You may have heard the name Mondavi. This is a Mondavi wine. This is Michael Mondavi's wine. Now, Michael Mondavi makes a wine called M, and it's called M by Mondavi. It's about $175 a bottle. You can get it for as low as about $125 a bottle if you can find it. It comes in a 3-pack. He also makes this wine, which I purchased for $12.99. Now, you've all heard of SIRAH, and SIRAH is made in France and it's made in Australia. It's also called Shiraz. People will say, well, what's the difference between SIRAH spelled with an I or a Y or Shiraz? And here's the answer. There is no difference. It's the same wine. It's just spelled differently in a different country. SIRAH is equivalent to Cabernet. To me, it is, you know how they say like, pork is the other white meat? SIRAH is the other Cabernet. Most people, if you go to any restaurant that has any sense of a wine list and they have 10 Cabernets, they will have 1 Petite SIRAH. They will have maybe 2 or 3 SIRAHs. Petite SIRAH is not a kind of smaller version of SIRAH. It's actually a bigger version of the flavor profile, okay? Blueberries, dark fruits, dark chocolate kind of taste. If you kind of smell it a little bit, it's just beautiful. I mean, it just smells like somebody took some blueberries and chocolate and crushed them and put them in the glass. And the interesting thing about Petite SIRAH, yes, it's a red wine. It looks like a typical red wine, but to me, it's got an incredible hue of pink and purple. It's just a very, very pretty wine. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about tonight and just your normal wine thing, because this is what everybody does. 98% of all wine purchased in the United States of America is drunk within 24 hours. And the way that happens is you're on your way home from work. You may remember going to work before the pandemic. You stop by the wine shop or the grocery store, you pick up a bottle, you come home, you open it with your dinner, and you drink it right away. And that's the worst thing you can do. I had a message sent out to say, hey, can you open the wines, 15 minutes, 30 minutes before this tasting? I don't care what you bought. I don't care how much you spent. Any bottle of wine that you have will taste better 15 minutes after opening it than if you open it right away and drink it. And if you don't believe me, try it. Go out and buy a $10 wine, buy 2 bottles, open up one, open them both, start drinking one and drink the other one in 15 minutes. And you'll feel like you're tasting 2 separate wines. So if you can wait. When I open up expensive bottles of wine, I'll open them up at 8 o'clock in the morning for dinner because they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine at 7, 8 o'clock at night. So don't be afraid to open up your wine an hour before, 2 hours before. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's going to be just fine. It's just going to get more air and it's going to taste better. So this is, to me, one of the best $12 wines I've ever had. What I want you to do is I asked you to get like some meat, some salami, some prosciutto. I got some prosciutto. First thing I want you to do is I want you to try the wine. Just take a sip and, you know, see if you like it. And this wine has an exceptional sweetness to it. It's very well made. It's good. I mean, and for $13, it's great. I mean, and this is a wine. I started drinking this wine probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it was $12.99. The price has not gone up. They changed the label, and the price is still the same. So if you took all that you had in your glass, pour a little bit more, and then I want you to drink it with whatever meat that you brought to the tasting. Yeah. Now, 2 things about Petite Sirah. You're not going to find it at the bar at your hotel. It's just not going to happen. You're not likely to find it on a wine by the glass list at any restaurant. You're going to be shocked if you go to a restaurant and you see that they have a Petite Sirah on the menu. They're just not high production wines, and people don't know about them. And the one thing I want to tell you about that is that those are the best values at any restaurant. For example, a restaurant like a steakhouse, like a Capitol Grill or Ruth's Chris, you will find that wines that are lesser known by the general public are priced much better because they're hard to sell. Most people want their Cabernet, their Merlot, their Chardonnay. They've never had a Petite Sirah. And so a Petite Sirah, like if Spellbound was on the menu, it would probably be on the menu for $40, as opposed to, you know, a Cabernet that's $70, $80. The second thing I want to tell you is this is a great wine for conversation. It's a red wine. It tastes great. I think it's not very tannic. You know, you can have this with steak. You could have this with chicken. You could have this with any kind of really good cheese. I don't know how many of you picked up the Parmigiano Reggiano. This is the best cheese made in the world. This cheese is phenomenal. It's not cheap. You can find little pieces of it, but even a little piece of it, you know, maybe that size is probably about $7, $8. But it is the wine cheese, mainly for red wine, in my opinion. You can eat it with white wine, but it's just got this incredible texture. It's Parmesan, okay, but it's not like the Parmesan that you buy to put on your pasta. It's hard, and it is the best pairing cheese you can get. So if you have some Parmigiano Reggiano, stick it in your mouth and try some of this Petite Sirah. And it kind of melts with the wine. And it's just again, I think it's the best cheese in the world. And whenever I'm doing wine, I pick up some because I just think it pairs so well. There's not a lot of Petite Sirahs on the market. This Spellbound is just one that I've been impressed with since the day it was made by the Mondavis. I hope you like it. Can we go to the second slide? So down at the bottom here, it has some pairings: barbecue, roasted pork, braised beef, Gouda or Swiss cheese, and then the veggie thing, stuffed peppers. Not a big vegetable and wine person. Maybe you are, but to me, it's like the soup thing. Soup and vegetables is not really my wine pairing, but if you're into that, try it. You may like it. The interesting thing about this slide is on the left, there's a wine called Freak Show. Looks kind of really funny and dumb and cute. That's a very popular Petite Sirah. You can find that all over the place. And even though it looks literally like a freak show, I get a lot of good feedback from that wine. But again, you know, it's $22 a bottle. It's $10 more than this wine made by Michael Mondavi. So this would be a good wine to go get some Spellbound, go get a bottle of Freak Show and see what you like better. You know, I'm thinking you may like the Spellbound better for $10 less. And as far as the pairings with Gouda or Swiss, there's nothing that's going to kill you about pairing with any kind of cheese. I really recommend for Petite Sirah that you do the Parmigiano Reggiano or the goat cheese. If you want to try Gouda, smoked Gouda, I would get smoked Gouda. It's fine. Swiss, I'm not a big fan of pairing Swiss with wine. So, any questions about the Petite Sirah?
So we have quite a few questions this time. One that we missed from the last time was about swirling the wine in your mouth. They heard that would help aerate it. And so is that true? And if you, when you do put it in your mouth and swish it around, how do you best do that?
Okay, so the thing about wine that people do is they pour it out of the bottle and they just drink it. The first thing you want to do is smell it, okay? Then you want to swirl it, and then you want to put a little bit in your mouth. And move it around. You'll get this acidic feel after drinking it. You'll get this acidic feel. And it'll feel like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you swallow it. Now, you don't want to do that all the time. You want to drink wine like a normal person, okay? You don't want to be playing with it a lot. But if you want to see how acidic it gets, you can kind of swish it back and forth in your mouth. But the key for me is to always try the wine alone first. I don't care what you're doing. I mean, if you're having dinner, just take a sip, try it, because you're going to get a different flavor profile from that than with the food. A lot of people miss out on the whole how important wine is to food, and they just think it's a drink. But it's really something that can add or take away from what you're eating.
Does sustainable or organic wine make a difference?
It makes a difference to the consumer. I live in Florida. I live a mile from the water. I care about the environment. When I go to a winery and they tell me that it's organically farmed or that it's sustainable, I'm still wondering whether it's good. I'm happy for them. I'm glad they're doing it that way. But I'm not someone who goes to a wine shop and says, where's the organic wine section? Some people do that. They're into natural wines. I'm not. I've had some organic wines that are good, but that does not make a difference. It makes a difference to the consumer. Okay.
So you may address this later about the corks or screw caps, plastic, and if you are, we can skip to the next one, but there's questions about that.
So let me say this about corks and screw tops. Don't be a snob. There are some very expensive wines that are made with screw tops, especially in Australia. Screw tops haven't been around long enough to make a determination as to the effect on them. But the fact that a wine is a screw top, other than someone's going to make fun of you and say, oh, you drink screw top wines, corks have just been around for a long time. They come from trees, and it's a vessel that keeps air in the wine, but so does a screw top. And again, there's no 100-year-old wine that has a screw top. The problem with screw tops is an ego thing, is that people say, oh, that wine's got a screw top. This Spellbound has a screw top. The Oyster Bay has a screw top. Again, I've had some expensive wines from Australia that have screw tops. So don't ever judge a wine because it has a screw top or it has a cork. Corks break, and sometimes they taint the flavor of the wine. Screw tops don't do that.
Okay. This one is about storing reds, and so fridge or no fridge after opening, and then is there a temperature degree for whites and reds?
So the question I get a lot is, I want to buy some red wine. I want to buy more than a couple bottles, but I don't have a wine refrigerator to store to 57 degrees. That's fine. The only reason you should be storing red wine at 57 degrees, which is the benchmark, is because you're going to keep it for 5 to 10 years, which most of you are not going to do. Don't worry about the temperature. You don't want it sitting in your trunk. You don't want it sitting by a window. You don't want to keep it in a cool, dark place. But your average $10, $20 Cabernet is going to be fine for 5 years sitting in a closet in your house. White wines are chilled at 37 degrees, the same temperature as a refrigerator. And if you're storing them, they're a little less sensitive to heat because they don't have that tannic structure as a red wine does. But the key is, you know, you're going to have to drink them quicker. So there's very few white wines that you're going to keep for years and years and years. But if you're storing them, all wine should be stored in a cool, dark place. White wines you can store in a place that's not so cool and not so dark. But if you're going to chill your red wine, chill it to 57 degrees. And by the way, don't be afraid to chill it at a restaurant. A lot of restaurants will give you a bottle of red wine that has not been chilled. And you may be embarrassed by this, but ask for an ice bucket. I've done it. Say, I want this wine put in an ice bucket for 20 minutes before I open it to cool it down. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But just don't think if you're going to start collecting red wine that it all has to be kept at 57 degrees, because unless you're keeping it for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, that's not going to be relevant.
Okay. What does body of the wine refer to?
So if you swirl this Petite SIRAH, okay, and you look carefully, you will see some lines that look like clear lines kind of slowly dripping down. And that's what we refer to as legs. Now, you may also see a little bit of like spots on your glass. They're very hard to see, but that's called tartaric acid. Every red wine has tartaric acid. It's meaningless. It's not going to do anything to you. But the key in determining the body of the wine, whether it's a full body or a light bodied wine, is how fast and how thick those legs drip down the glass. If you have a very heavy Cabernet Sauvignon, it's going to take a long time and you're going to see them. This has body to it. This is a full bodied wine for $13. So that's how you determine what the body of the wine is. You also determine it by looking straight down the middle of the glass. You look straight down the middle of this glass, you can see on the edges of the wine, it lightens up. And an older wine, you're going to see a clear ring around it because the red is starting, the fruit is starting to fade and the alcohol is starting to overtake the fruit. But if you look straight down the glass, you can't see the bottom of the glass. It is deep, deep red. That is a full-bodied red wine. A Pinot Noir, you could probably see the bottom of the glass because that is not a full-bodied red wine.
A couple of questions about decanters and why you would pour wine into a decanter.
You pour wine into a decanter because it looks pretty, number one. Because your spouse doesn't want a bottle of wine sitting on the table. But the other reason you do a decanter is because most decanters will have a wide body at the bottom. And the more room the wine has to breathe out of the bottle, the better you're going to be. You know, I've been to people's homes that they don't have decanters, and I've said, do you have a pitcher, glass or plastic or whatever? I'll pour the wine in the pitcher. Because any container that's going to give the wine more room than the bottle is going to be fine. Remember, when you pull a cork, that wine has been in that bottle for maybe a year, 6 months. It needs air. And the more air you give it, the better off you are. If you have a really nice, big, thick Cabernet, open the bottle, pour it in the decanter, swirl the decanter around, and let it sit. White wines, you don't decant as much. I decant white wines for events, dinners, breakfasts, things like that where I'm serving white wine. But it's really for red wine. And anything you can do to help the wine breathe is going to be beneficial.
Do you feel that the wand wine filters help with headaches from red wines?
I don't know because I've never used them. The experience I've had with red wine drinkers who have headaches is that they basically stop drinking red wine. So I don't know anything about the wand as far as whether I could say that it works.
Okay. Why don't we move on, and then I'll kind of go through some more of the questions,
Okay.
and bring them back to the next round.
Okay. So we're going to move to Zinfandel. And I had recommended Klein Zinfandel. I can get it there. Okay, so this is Klein Zinfandel. But what I found was they make this special Zinfandel called Ancient Vines. Most Zinfandel, and let me just give you a little bit of history. Zinfandel came from Italy. And in Italy, it was called Primitivo. And it's still called Primitivo. They don't make a lot of it. But what happened was literally somebody took a vine and planted it in California, and they call it Zinfandel. And it's some year, I don't remember the year, somebody came by and said, hey, let's do a DNA test on this vine. And they said, oh, this is Primitivo. So Primitivo and Zinfandel are the same thing. Primitivo is not a very popular wine in Italy. Italy is popular for their Sangiovese and Nebbiolo grapes, which makes Barolo, Barbaresco, Brunello, and Rosa di Montalcino. But Zinfandel is very popular, mainly in California, and a lot in Sonoma County. Zinfandel is one of my favorite red wines, and it gets a really bad rap because people know white Zinfandel, which you can get for $7, $8. Sutter Home makes it. Behringer makes it. Behringer makes 4 million cases of white Zinfandel a year. But red Zinfandel is a red wine. It is a very temperamental grape. It's very small. And on a lot of Zinfandel bottles, you will see the term old vines, because most Zinfandel is made with old vines. And I'm talking, 30, 40, 50, even older vines. People don't like it. It's a big wine. Some of the Zinfandels can be 16% alcohol, which is very high when you think your average Cabernet is about 12.7, and that difference is huge. Zinfandel is just a different flavor profile, okay? It is, as it says on the slide, great with barbecue. It's a great barbecue wine. Burgers, dogs, ribs, having people over for barbecue. And it's, again, one of those wines a lot of people don't drink. So let's swirl this around a little bit. And again, by swirling it, we're putting some air into the glass. Let's smell it. So Zinfandel has that typical plum flavor profile. Yeah. So the other thing Zinfandel goes really good with is pizza. So if you have some pizza there, which I think I mentioned you may want to have, I would take a bite of the pizza and try some of the Zinfandel. If you don't mind, I'm going to do that. So this Klein Zinfandel, the Ancient Vines, is like a step up from the regular Klein. I think the regular Klein Zinfandel was $11, $12. This was, I think, $15, and I hadn't had it. I'm a big fan of Klein. The problem with Zinfandel is it's hard to find good, cheap Zinfandel. Most decent Zinfandels are in the $30 range. And if you're not going to drink this a lot, maybe it's okay to spend $30, $35 on a bottle of Zinfandel. But if it's something that you like, you're going to have a hard time finding good, less expensive Zinfandels. Klein is a Zinfandel from Sonoma that I drank some years ago. I think it was $11, and I was really impressed with it. So I went out and I bought this Ancient Vines Zinfandel. But if you're going to get into Zinfandel, I would look at producers like Ridge. There's another one called Bialy, B-I-A-L-E. Those are in the mid $30 range, sometimes a little bit more, but they're excellent Zinfandels. It's just a hard wine to make well because it does have a high alcohol content, and some people don't like that. So you got to have really good fruit in the wine in order for it to come out balanced. We have a second slide on the Zinfandel. So like I said, Zinfandel is the barbecue wine. It's a perfect wine for barbecue, a little higher in alcohol. You got that plum, that acid. If you're sticking some really big sauce on some ribs, you want to have a few bottles of Zinfandel sitting around. Questions?
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between letting a wine sit and air versus using an aerator?
So those little gimmicky Venturi aerators work. There was a video once on the internet, somebody like put wine in a blender to see what would happen. And it made it taste better. And it was obvious because you're just splitting, you know, again, here's some juice sitting in a bottle with a cork, getting very, very little air. You open it up, stick it in a blender. Obviously, it's going to open up. The aerator, when you pour it in, what it's doing is it's splitting up the tannins in the wine, and it's making it smoother. And again, this is an experiment. Open up a bottle of wine, buy two of the same bottles, put one through an aerator, and don't put the other one through the aerator. I've got like a bunch of these aerators sitting around. I use them all the time. I'm a big fan, and the prices have gone down because now there's all these, you know, knockoff companies. You can go on Amazon. You don't have to buy Venturi, although Venturi's price has dropped because they have some competitors. But I'm a big fan of the aerators.
What is the determining factor for acidity?
Well, acidity comes from how the grapes are fermented, how long they're in the fermentation tank, and basically how whatever grapes are used in the wine. So some wines will be 100%. And this is a question to ask. For example, you go buy a Cabernet. You may not know this, but most Cabernets are a blend. What does that mean? It's 97% Cabernet, 3% Petite Verdot, okay? And you may not care about that, but in order for a wine to be called a Cabernet, it has to have a certain amount of Cabernet. It may be 75%, it may not be 100%. So acidity is determined by the blend of the wine. And the other thing too is that a lot of these wines are chemically treated. We talked about organic and sustainable. So, you know, wine just doesn't get pulled off a vine, put into a crush pad, put into a fermentation tank, put into a barrel, put into a bottle. Some wines are like that, but a lot of wines, they add things to them to create a little bit more acidity, to create a little bit more flavor. The only way that you're going to know the acidity of a wine is by trying it.
Okay. Do you have a New Zealand Pinot Noir to recommend?
Well, I will tell you that most of the producers that make Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand also make a Pinot Noir. So, you know, you have your Kim Crawford. Oyster Bay makes a New Zealand New Zealand Pinot Noir. You know, those are going to be the same quality based on, you know, what you're getting out of the Sauvignon Blancs that are being made there. So I would look for a winery that makes Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir, and maybe not anything else. You know, some of these wineries make 25 different wines. The quality gets reduced. So if you like a Sauvignon Blanc, I would try their Pinot Noir.
Can you talk about the alcohol content of wine? And so some, you know, red wines can be a little bit higher, Pinot Noirs can be a little bit higher. How does that happen?
Content is very important. And the reason it's important is because one of the things you'll hear people like me talk about is whether the wine has balance. If I can taste the alcohol in a wine, it is not balanced. The fruit is not covering up, let's say, the flavor of the wine, and I can taste the alcohol. Now, that'll happen in an old wine. The other night, I had a really old wine, and I could taste the alcohol and very little fruit. So your average Cabernet is going to have between 12.5 and 13.7, maybe a little higher in alcohol. Your average Zinfandel is going to be anywhere from 15 to a little over 16. Your Merlots are going to be 14%. But the thing is, that difference is tremendous. And so if you're drinking a wine with 16% alcohol, it has to be an exceptionally well-made wine, or you're going to feel like you're just drinking alcohol. So look for the numbers. All alcohol contents are required to be on labels, but you're generally going to find, your cabs to be 14, your Zins to be 16. If you see a cab that has 16%, I would run as fast as you can run.
I think I'm going to pronounce this word wrong, but thoughts on using a Korovin to drink by the glass for specialty wines?
So you're talking about the Korovin, which has really changed how wine is served, mainly at restaurants and wineries. It's a phenomenal device. I have one, and I don't use it a lot because normally I open a bottle and that's it, it's gone. But if you think about it, you go to a winery where they're just giving out samples. Now they can save those bottles for 2 weeks just by using a Korovin. It's about $300, but if you want to drink a bottle of wine over a couple of weeks and not 1 or 2 days, in the end it may wind up saving you money, but a Korovin is not something to use with these kinds of wines. If you've got $100 bottles sitting around and you say, hey, I want to drink this tonight and then, next Thursday, you use a Korovin. But it is a tried and true device. It has changed the way restaurants, you go to restaurants now, you'll see a Korovin wine list because they have a $400 bottle and they can serve that over a couple of weeks instead of opening it up on a Saturday night and then hoping that the next night somebody comes in and orders a few glass. So if you've got some money and you've got some wines that are important to you, you may want to consider it.
Okay. What is your favorite pairing? It's a pretty broad question.
Well, I guess the typical thing to say is my favorite pairing would be steak and, a really, really good Cabernet. But I'm a big fan of popcorn and champagne, and I'm not a champagne fan. And I'm also a big, big fan of what I was talking about in the beginning, and that is that whole appetizer world with like lemon and bright seasonings with a very dry white wine. I think it just makes all the difference. If you want to try something, get some cheese and honey and a dry white wine. It will change your life, no doubt.
Okay. After opening red wines, do I put them in the fridge? And how long would they last in the fridge?
Yeah. Yes. Put them in the fridge with a cork. 2-3 days. If it's a really well-made wine, maybe 4 days. But the key is take it out of the fridge, let it warm up. Don't drink it at 37 degrees. You'll feel like you're drinking grape juice. Let it sit out for 15 minutes and then drink it. The good thing about red wine is that you know when it's bad. It tastes sour, it tastes like vinegar. There's something off about it. White wines are a little bit different because they just kind of taste flat and you're like, well, I'm not sure. But in a red wine, yes, if you drink half the bottle, you're going to drink it the next night, you can leave it out on the counter. But if you want to drink it for the next couple of days, I would definitely put it in the fridge because it's going to keep that flavor from coming out of the bottle.
What is your number one frugal pick and your number one niche pick when it comes to wine?
And you said my number one frugal pick and my number one what?
Niche pick.
Oh, okay. So I will tell you, and it's the reason I picked this one. My number one frugal pick is, well, let me say there. I'll cheat and give you two. This Mondavi Spellbound Petite SIRAH, I think, just over delivers like incredibly. I mean, I would pay $25 for this wine and I wouldn't complain about it. There's also some really inexpensive German Rieslings out there. Dr. Lucen makes one. Depending on where you get it, it can be $12, $13, $14. It's an exceptional Riesling if you're into sweet German white wines. It's a really, really good wine, and it's very versatile. You can serve it with a lot of different white meat and fish. When you were asking about like my favorite, like what's my favorite wine, people ask me, oh, what's your favorite wine? I will tell you the best bottle of wine I ever drank in my life was a 2004, what's called Alto, A-A-L-T-O-P-S, which is a Spanish Tempranillo. I have one bottle left. Somebody gave it to me for my birthday. I thought it was the best wine I ever had. There's still some of it around. It's hard to find. You can find it on certain websites, but that was the best bottle that I've ever had.
And so we're not drinking Cabernet, but do you have your favorite reasonably priced Cabernet to recommend?
Well, we were talking a little bit before about Josh. Josh is a real value, I think, in Cabernet. It's an interesting story. Joseph Carr is the winemaker. His father was Joseph Carr Sr., but they called him Josh, and so he made this wine as a tribute to his father. He also makes Joseph Carr Cabernet, but Josh has become a very popular wine. And I think for 12, 13, 14, I think the price has creeped up again. It's a really good wine. I will tell you, for a little bit more money, and I see this on a lot of restaurant wine lists, is a wine called Faust. Faust is what they call second label of Vineyard 29. And Vineyard 29, I think, is $300 a bottle or something. Faust is, depending on the day, $39 a bottle. And I find it to be an exceptional, if you're going out for a birthday party at a steakhouse and you see Faust on the menu, that's the bottle I would get if you didn't want to spend a few $100s on a bottle of wine.
Okay. Why do they put sulfates in wine?
Well, because it helps preserve the wine. The key to wine is it's got to last. That's why years ago when wine came over here by ship, the only thing they could make was Madeira and sherry, because it had so much sugar in it that it would last. And that's why you can still buy Madeira that's 100 years old and it tastes fine, because it's just incredibly preserved. So that sulfites are kind of the same thing.
When you say flat, like white wine can get flat, what are you referring to?
Well, it's like soda, right? I mean, when you drink a soda, that feeling when like you think someone gave you a glass of water, but it was Sprite, and you're like, even though you like Sprite, you're like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. It's the opposite. When you drink a white wine, you get a little bit of an acidity to it, and then one day you open it and it just tastes like water. It tastes like flavored water. That's how you know it's time to go get another bottle. Okay.
Do you have a recommendation for a wine topper other than the cork or the screw?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the stoppers, and you can buy them at Total Wine. You can buy them at a grocery store, but they're like kind of a triangular thing. Some of them are like silver. You can buy them at gift shops. You just stick it in the bottle, and it'll be fine. They make these. You can buy them. I think they come in packs of 3 or 4 where it has a pump, an air pump to take the air out. If you really want to do something spectacular like that, you can do that. But if you're going to keep the wine for a couple of days, I don't think anything but just a typical stopper that maybe has like a souvenir kind of thing on top, those are fine.
Okay. I have a couple who lives in South Florida, and they're wondering what the best red wine to drink is in warm climates.
Well, it's going to be a lighter red wine. I'll give you an example that you're probably not expecting, and that's a wine called Lambrusco. Lambrusco is a chilled red wine. It's very hard to find. There's like 3 producers left, I think, that make it. You chill it, it's exceptional. But if you're looking for like your typical red wine, I would go with Pinot. California Pinot Noir is going to be lighter, and it's something that you're going to enjoy a lot more in a warmer climate if you just want to drink a typical red wine. But I would look for a bottle of Lambrusco.
Yeah. And so we have went over our time a little bit. I know there's a couple other questions that have come in. And so do you have a recommendation of where people can go to get questions answered like this?
Sure. I get emails and texts all the time about wine. I enjoy talking about it more than I do law. And it's really easy for me to answer a question. So don't feel bad. I get the whole, what do you suggest for my anniversary? I've got $100 to spend, or, you know, tomorrow's my brother's birthday. He really likes Merlot. What do you recommend? I'm always happy to answer those questions. Google my name, and I've got, you know, several email addresses, and feel free to reach out. Just let me know, you know, you're a Delaware alum, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Perfect. Well, we want to thank you, Brian, specifically for doing this and hosting this for us. I mean, this was just outstanding. And I don't know if you've been able to see and follow along with the chats, but everyone is loving it. And so this was an awesome event. I want to give a special kudos and thanks to my colleague, Kate, who really put this event on and really worked with both Brian and Jennifer to make this a possibility. And, you know, these events really do help keep all of the Blue Hens connected and together and during these times. And so it's a nice, refreshing way to close out the day. Kate, did you want to say anything before we close out?
Just thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Brian, so much. I think this was such a great interactive experience for folks. And, you know, as folks are leaving, I'd encourage you to take a photo perhaps of your experience tonight and share it on social media so we can see how much fun you had. I realize it may all be empty glasses by now, but nonetheless, it will be interesting to see your experience. And so if you tag UD alumni and hashtag Blue Hens Forever, we'll be able to see your posts and would love to interact with you and share some of our events that are coming up in the future. So thanks again.